What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This is AxiA. I haven't done one of these videos where I talk in front of the camera in a very long time, but just recently me and Joe just launched our 20th short film, and I thought what a great occasion to try to bring back one of those breakdowns that I used to do back in the days for this new one. And by the way, have you guys watched the short film yet? If you haven't, pause this video right now because this is just a breakdown, so you won't understand anything that I'm talking about. Click is in the description below, and once you watch the film, let us know in the comments below if you liked it or not. You know, as filmmakers, it's always crucial and important to get feedback from the community. So for this short film, I really wanted to challenge myself. I usually am very comfortable, shooting with a tripod or handheld and at night where I can have full control of my lighting once I set it up. For this film, I really wanted to flip the script around, shoot in broad daylight, and have the camera perhaps on a gimbal moving the whole time, keeping the whole film very interesting throughout the shots. But that meant that for the first time, I wasn't really able, to shoot my film in a chronological order. I love to shoot in a chronological order my scenes so that I can keep track of how the story is developing, and it's easier for me to remember if I got all the shots or not. This time instead, we had to really pick the order of the shots that we were going to shoot based on the position of the sun in relation to our scene. So a few days before the actual shoot, I went to the location in Lake Arrowhead, and with my phone I tracked the sun path throughout the day. That way I was able, before the shoot, to schedule ahead, the order of the shots based on the position of the sun. So for lighting, the main idea was to have the entirety of the scenes to have a backlighting feel. So once I figured out the sun path, I placed my character in a way so that throughout the day they would have the sign behind them. And then eventually with like an ultra bounce on a C-stand, I would return some of that sunlight back into their face to gain some exposure. And then on the opposite corner where I put the ultra bounce, I would hang some negative fill so that their face would have a nice transition from light to darkness. And I pretty much use this overall technique for the 70% of the film. Bouncing some light with the ultra bounce camera left in this shot and having a neg camera right. In this other shot, the opposite. The ultra bounce is camera left and the neg is camera right. And the sunlight always provide a nice backlighting to the scene. At some point though, during the later hours of the day, the sun kind of moved completely differently from its position, and it turned into some sort of like side light to the path of the scene. At that point, I knew I couldn't really bounce the light anymore. I had to diffuse it instead. As far as diffusion, we used highlight. We had a fairly small piece of highlight that we were winging around to try to diffuse the light on our characters. What I really like about highlight is that a diffusion that doesn't diffuse too much. It just takes the edge off a little bit of the sunlight, retaining that hard light quality and retaining also those nice textures on the skin, as you can see in all of the shots. Now it almost feels like we didn't use diffusions, but that's the cool part of highlight, taking the edge off while retaining that very nice natural look. So now that I explained you the main theory behind how we use the sunlight, you might think that this was an easy process, but that's absolutely very far from reality. The reality is that I didn't calculate one single factor that really made the shoot very complicated. We were shooting in a location with very high trees, and we absolutely looked for that. The challenge with that is that in the later hours of the day, the sun started to hide behind the trees. That meant that every time we placed the actors in a pool of light that was coming through the trees, we would only have just a few minutes to get their lines before the shadow would creep in because the sun has just moved behind another tree. That meant that throughout the whole film, we were literally chasing sunlight through the trees. Sometimes we had just a few minutes to shoot the scene before we had to relocate and reposition the actor where the sun was there available.
A lot of stress.
Very stressful, yeah. That made the shooting very stressful, and I'm not lying when I say that towards the end I thought we weren't gonna be able to get all the coverage we needed. But thanks to some color grading tricks and editing tricks and our actors being so good, we were able to make the film work with the shots that were very fragmented throughout the day. So as far as camera for the short film, we use my red Komodo X, which I've been using for quite a while and I completely love. As far as lenses this time, instead I was able to test out for the very first time my set of Atlas Mercury's Anamorphic. And for the 90% of the film, we used the 42mm. I am beyond impressed by the image quality of the Atlas. They have some beautiful vintage characteristics, a very nice bokeh, and they're actually pretty sharp. And I was pretty pleased by the look of these lenses, especially because we were shooting for the majority of the day at t3.2 or t4, and the lenses were still creating a lot of separation between the subject and the background. I am very excited to be shooting my next short films on these lenses. Now, in order to get the Komodo X and the Atlas Mercury to move on a gimbal the whole time, our camera operator Alan did some magic wizardry, being able to balance, the Komodo X with the Atlas 42 on the Arri 3 Pro, and then he used the tilt-a-float as an extension of the gimbal. And I will tell you guys, the tilt-a-float is a very, very underrated tool. I was very surprised of the moves that we were able to capture with the tilt-a-float, low angles, high angles, and also when we didn't need movement, the tilt-a-float gave a very tripod feel to the camera, which usually you cannot get when you're operating the gimbal by itself. I think the tilt-a-float is a very, very underrated tool. I don't see it very often in many sets or, in many behind the scenes that I look around on the internet, but it's a very, very powerful tool, and I think we're gonna be using it moving forward. As far as pulling focus remotely, we use the Tilta Nano 2, which ended up working out great, and it has absolutely enough torque to, rack focus on lenses such as the Atlas Anamorphics. Speaking of editing and color grading, it was my very first time editing this film in DaVinci Resolve without, doing the round trip from Premiere Pro. And I am proud to say that I have finally canceled my subscription to Adobe and moved 100% into Resolve, which proved to be a powerhouse for the short film. The fact that you can edit and color in the same platform is just amazing. I think for color grading, the main challenge was to be able to somewhat balance the shots amongst each other, because a lot of the shots are mixing together, but they were taken in different times of day. But also one of the main challenges were to be able to boost some light into the shadows while protecting the highlights. While filming the short films, we really paid attention to never clip highlights, and we ended up with like a raw footage that felt kind of dark and underexposed on the skin tones, even despite bouncing some light back with the ultra bounce. That meant that in post, I really needed to pump some more light, through color grading in the midtones and to the shadows. Now, as I was doing that, I was also introducing a lot of light into the highlights as well, which were borderline safe. So I ended up for the short film creating across the board 2 different exposures. That meant that for the shadow, midtones region of the image, I created one contrast curve, and for the highlight region of the image, I created another curve, and then I blend them and stitch them in post. We were shooting in the middle of May, and the sun was already very strong, creating very, very harsh highlights and very, very deep shadows. So it really took a little bit of trickery to try to get the most dynamic range out of the camera. So as far as sound goes, we used the MKE 600 boom mic for the entirety of the short film, and we only used a boom mic, no lavs or nothing else. We plugged it into the Zoom F3 so that I could get, a 32-bit float recording. And then in post, my good friend Jacopo Pina made a nice mix to the vocals to make sure that we're sounding nice and crisp for the whole film. As far as music, once again, we had our friend Joe Hoggins scoring the entirety of the film. I'm always glad to be collaborating with this guy because, every time I watch my film with his music, it's always, that 20, 30, 40% better than it was without music. Thank you, Joe, once again.
So when it comes to story, we start with a concept or an idea, and we see how many wild punches or twists or genres we could really hit, and then from there we kind of bring it back to reality. So for this was based on a sketch we saw in a sketch writing class that was about a minute scene, and we wanted to make it into a full short film. So from there we had to add layers, what kind of relationship we wanted. We liked the father-son relationship. We liked the Bigfoot revealing himself a couple times, there being a big fight at the end. And so those were kind of the key moments that we started with, and then we started to fill in the blanks. And from there we go into the dialogue writing process, where we're writing the dialogue, trying to make it as realistic as possible and also trying to keep it as tight as possible. So with short form content like this that we're putting on YouTube, we're trying to get to the meat and the core of the short film as quickly as possible. But at the same time, there's a balance because you need to build up the characters, you need to kind of build that world. So it's kind of towing a fine line between getting all the information you want out there, but also keeping it tight and quick. So finding a location for this was really tricky because, we were shooting outside, we wanted tall trees, we wanted that vibe of where a Bigfoot would be. And in Los Angeles, there's a lot of, bushes, shorter trees, hiking trails that are full of people. So we needed something that was quieter, that, there wouldn't be people walking through, there wouldn't be car noises. So we took a drive to Arrowhead. We looked around for a couple hours, really didn't find the ideal spot that we wanted. And on our way out, we just happened to drive by a real estate agency. We said, hey, why don't we swing in there and ask them if they have any recommendation. So we went in, spoke with the real estate agent, kind of explained what we were trying to do, showed her some of the work that we've done, and she said that she had a plot of land she was trying to sell that might be a good fit. So we went to scout the location that she gave us, and we absolutely loved it. So the next thing now was finding a place that, you know, we could kind of set up as a base camp. We just knocked on the first door closest to the trail. A guy named Adrian answered. We explained to him that we were making a passion project short film. We showed him some of the work that we've done, and I guess he thought the idea was cool enough where he allowed us to park our cars there, you know, set up lunch, use the restroom. And it also goes to show you that there's a lot of people out there willing to help you if you show that you're passionate about what you're doing and you could show them that you can execute. So when it came to the costume, we wanted something that looked good and was very convincing. So we hit up Chad Evett, who actually made the Pfizer Man costume in our Pfizer Man short film, which, you know, turned out great. And he is so good at mix and matching and putting things together to look great and also be very cost effective. And also for Jonas's costume, you know, we love to reference movies or shows in different ways. And so for Jonas, we had the yellow trench coat, the red beanie, kind of giving a little shout out to it.
I also want to take a second to give a shout out to the actors of the films, especially starting from the two main protagonists, Freddy and Jonas. Jonas is a fantastic child actor.
Jonas, how do you think the shoot is going so far?
Going pretty good. I'm very happy and excited.
He actually, you know, did a few short films with us 3-4 years ago, and then subsequently went ahead and booked major TV shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Sweet Tooth Season 2, and now, next year, he's the lead protagonist of the next Pixar movie called Elio. He literally is Elio. He's the voice of Elio. So we are beyond stoked that Jonas was, you know, humble enough to come back and work with us on this short film. As far as the other protagonist of the film, Freddie John James, he's also been a veteran. He's been in many of our short films, and we know we can always rely on him because he's a great actor capable of great drama, great comedy, and also he's a great stuntman, as you can see in the fighting scenes that we have at the end. Huge shout out also to Lynette Torres for playing the mom in the short film. And last but not least, a huge thank you also to Austin Barthel for playing the Bigfoot in the short film. He did a great job, and I'm sure he was very hot in that Bigfoot costume throughout the whole day. Also, a massive thank you to our crew. You know, we try to make these short films on a no budget or on a very, very little budget. And we have, at this point, a pool of friends, very talented friends, that are ready to come with us on these short films and make this happen. So huge shout out to Alan, the camera operator, Brian, the focus puller, Darren and Thierry for, you know, helping with whatever we needed. We could not do this, guys, without your help. And lastly, thank you so much, Paisley, for capturing some great BTS throughout the day. And thank you so much for donating a lot of your gear to this film. Thank you so much, guys. Hopefully this breakdown was helpful for you. Let me know in the comments if you wish to see some more breakdowns in the future. You know, as always, leave a like, drop a comment, you know, subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys in the next short film.
Take you off your headphones?
Dad, I'm sorry I overreacted. I just